Hey, I have a present.
Hey, Eddie, you back, huh?
Look, I found this really cool Pokemon concert and I thought we could just talk about it.
Okay. That does sound...
Does it have any clarinets?
I mean, probably?
You'll get over it. Welcome back to the Music Arcade.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Music Arcade Podcast. I'm Caleb the Sound Guy Firestone.
I'm Rana, very glad that Galen indeed did get over it.
And I'm Eddie and I'm really into oboes right now. You have no idea.
Yeah, I'm sure after the slop you left us with. By the way, is that the real Eddie, not just a clip recorded later and inserted into the podcast post-production?
I am secretly AI.
Oh, don't even joke about that right now.
As a Halloween miracle, I guess, I'm actually here.
Congratulations, good to have you.
Welcome back.
Yeah. I do just want to say one thing, because I was meant to be in the previous episode, and just life said no, so I couldn't
As
make
it
it just
does.
a quick point I wanted to make at the end of that episode, which is we didn't have access to the masters, and our memory is also kind of garbage. So if you listen to our episode on quote-unquote clarinets, and you either disagree with us or you have suggestions of songs that actually do use clarinets, you can now leave comments on Spotify as well, not just YouTube. So feel free to leave a comment on our previous episode.
Cool. I'm going to do that once this wraps. I didn't know that was a thing we could do.
Right.
Yeah, that...
Although, of course, our other avenues of communications, like comments on the video versions of the podcast or the mail music.arcade.podcast or at gmail.com, are always open to you. Of course, we welcome feedback with open arms.
Yeah, that last episode was a pain in the butt, and I'm just gonna be honest about that. That was disturbing. In all the time I've done this show, I've never felt so much on the back foot.
And for those listening, I was meant to be in the foxhole, so to speak, up to the last minute, because turned out my boss wanted us to cover live the HubSpot Inbound event, and I had to prepare a lot of stuff on that weekend, which turned out to be exactly the weekend where the episode was going to be recorded.
But now we're on to a new episode that was also one of yours. This time, however, we're given something infinitely more interesting than trying to pick a music out of a lineup, or a needle out of a stack of needles, as it turned out to be.
We are not free from the wind instruments, though this time it's more trumpets, at least on the original. Thankfully, not as much on this concert.
Those are brass!
Yeah, but still wind. Just not reeds.
No, woodwinds are a whole different thing. That's the flutes.
Okay, I guess the categorization in English is different from Portuguese, because those are all wind instruments that we subdivide.
Got it, yeah.
And...
No, we have them as separate categories. Woodwinds are your flutes, etc. Your reeds are your clarinets, your oboes, your saxes, and then your brasses are your trumpets, trombones.
Yeah, in Portuguese we do have like woodwinds, brass, and all that, but we lump them together as wind instruments.
Okay, so that was lost in translation, is what I understand happened there. Okay.
Yeah, basically. But anyway, going back to the topic. So,
yes.
This was a bit of a surprise, actually.
This was really cute.
Yeah, I do want to go real quick about how we discovered this thing and what this thing actually is. Because I think it wouldn't surprise anyone listening to know that we use YouTube on our free time quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And YouTube recommended this concert to me one day. as it would to someone who listens to video game music a lot. And at first, this was back in August, late July, early August, if I recall correctly, and it was meant to go away in I think August 8th, if memory serves me well.
The video description said like the beginning of September.
Oh, so then maybe it was late August that I found it. Either way, they were gonna take it down.
Right.
It was gonna be a temporary thing. Turns out they ended up changing their plans because everyone and their mother asked for them to keep it up. And this is
I guess in the meantime, Nintendo got busier making other stuff?
Apparently.
Yeah, hopefully they don't turn their attention to this, because this is an amateur orchestra.
It is, and
they're called Kanto Symphony.
Like
the fact that they're unaffiliated but still put out a production of this quality is super cool. Like, I have absolutely no complaints about this whatsoever. I'm really happy for these guys, and even if I'm not myself a Pokemon fan, which I'm not, full disclosure, I'm not a fan, I still got a lot out of this, and I'm still super happy that this exists, and I'm glad they kept it up and allowed us to continue to observe it and continue to have access to art, because that's...
Observe it.
I've talked about this a lot. Access to art is very important to me. So the fact that they went the extra mile to keep this up and not kill it from its artificial deadline, while, yes, risking Nintendo's wrath, I think is great.
I think it's also surprising that this is their 4th concert, according to their host, which I only know because the video has English subtitles now. It used to not have them.
I will admit, I skipped all the dialogue and reading stuff and only followed the music. So I
didn't realize there were English subtitles.
Yeah, the description mentioned they had automated translation, but when I checked, they actually had legit English translation. So someone helped them, I guess.
Good.
But yeah, this was apparently their 4th concert, and honestly, we'll go track by track, but overall, I'm impressed.
Yeah, same. Very same.
I'm probably going to be the least enthusiastic of us three, then.
Really?
I do have some issues with the songs and the game they come from, because that's my least favorite generation of all of Pokemon. So that's already not the greatest start.
Fair.
And to be clear, the actual performances are pristine.
Yes.
Impeccable. The way they are ordered and regrouped, the way the suites are organized, that I have issues with.
Okay.
And I'll go on then, as we'll go over each one.
I found myself...
what's very clear is that, for good or bad, it's clearly a project that's very high production, but still keeps the spirit of something by fans, for fans first and foremost.
Yes. I found there were, for me, 3 different methods of listening to this. There was listening for the music, which I'll admit, much like Ran, I got very little from. I don't have a huge amount of love for these compositions as compositions.
And it's hard to isolate specific talking points in a whole orchestra.
Yeah. The second thing that I did, and I got much more out of it, was focusing on the performances, which were infinitely better, and there were a couple of real high points for me.
Oh, yeah.
And the third one was more like vibe listening. And I hate using that term because usually that these days means something more ambient or something like that, which this clearly wasn't. But just kind of listening for the energy and listening for the feeling as opposed to any sort of active listening. This is apparently good music to talk to a friend to, which is a weird way of putting it, but...
Pretty great.
Yeah, it's there were definitely parts of this that I would revisit outside of this episode. Not necessarily from a musical standpoint, but just from an energy standpoint, like an I would not hate to hear this again kind of feel. And we may as well dive into the meat of it.
Dive.
Oh, for
Not yet.
crying out loud. Okay, you start
Let's
doing
start
this.
through the intro, which sure
Yes,
is an intro.
please.
Yeah, so, like, it's staying very much close to the source materials for the intro. It's, yeah.
Not being familiar with the source material, I can only go, yeah, that was fine. I did hear more clarinets in that opening track than I did just about the entire previous episode.
I was gonna make a joke about how this episode probably has more clarinets and more xylophones than our Wheel of Instruments episode.
Our xylophone episode worked out pretty okay. This one, the clarinet one was a nightmare, but the xylophone one worked out okay.
Next time I'm in charge of picking an instrument for the wheel, I'm just gonna go guitars. Which ones? Just any guitars.
There's like three different guitars already on the Wheel of Instruments, dude.
Yeah, no, like, I checked the music, the Wheel of Instruments. I would like, there's at this point only one instrument I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about, and that was Galen that put it deliberately as a half troll.
No, it was started as a full troll, and then I had a revelation that it's actually great.
Yeah, which is why I settled on half troll.
That's fair.
Going back to the concert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Intro, it's dynamic, it starts things out, it's pretty short, but it's energetic. Good.
Yeah.
It's cute.
So they named this one opening movie in the Switch because it uses bits from the opening cinematic of the games, plus the title theme for the main menu. I really enjoyed this one. Gen 3 wasn't the one I played the most. The one I grew up was Gen 2. But I played quite a bit of Gen 3, so this sent me back straight away.
Well then. Seems like there's a reason you like this concert so much, because I can see nostalgia being a huge appeal for this concert. Which is all the more funny for me, given that, now that I think of it, since I never actually replayed these games after the first time I played it, this means that this is the oldest generation of Pokémon by newest release I actually played, as far as I'm concerned, given that for first and second gen I played the remakes, and I stopped at Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby, or the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah, in my case, it was a bit of a thing about how back in the day, Brazil would get consoles late. It's why I played the SNES in the early 2000s, for example. So we got the GBA a bit late as well, meaning I played Gen 1 a little bit, then Gen 2 a lot, and I played Gen 3 via emulation at the time.
Gen 2 is still the best.
Yeah, Gen 2 is my favorite. But this is Gen 3 we're talking about, and I will say I am very happy they toned down the trumpets for the concert.
Yeah, I've made my note, and it's not just that they've toned it down, in my opinion, but we'll come back to that for part of the song that's part of the concert that's more of an example for that.
Now, for me, I don't have the same level of nostalgia. I'm coming into this as someone who has never heard these tracks before.
You are already listening to an FF14 concert of the episode.
Pretty much exactly. And I have played
don't
Legends.
Worry, we'll be on the same boat on the second half of this when they start playing. God damn it!
Stop it!
When they start playing songs from the remakes, we'll be like on the same wavelength. Rana will be our guide for the final bit.
Oh my god! No! No more of this! You sound like the Yakuza Games subreddit! Knock it off!
Sorry.
I am not doing this!
I am giving a 7 out of 10 too much water to Rana's puns today.
Are you?
Are you now?
Really?
Yes.
Okay, then.
Welcome back, Eddie.
Yeah, I am the chaos bringer, I think. Before we move to the next suite, I do want to note something that I found really cute that they did on this concert. In between suites, they would have a little bit of narration.
Yeah.
And that narration always had a little bit of music from the games in the background, played very softly.
Yes.
And I really do enjoy that they did that, because not only did that allow them to bring more songs to it, in this particular moment between the opening movie and the Hoenn Maritime Travelogue, they had one of the calmer route themes. I think it was pretty neat, and the host gave a very professional narration too. So shout outs to that as well. For an amateur orchestra, everything was very professional.
Yes, absolutely. I will admit, and now I'm regretting this, whenever I saw the guy with the book show up, I'd actually skip to the next track, not realizing there was music because I only have so many hours in the day. That tells me that I probably want to revisit this concert then and try to experience that too, because apparently I missed out pretty good.
Yeah, the songs they actually played in those, let's call them interludes, I guess, they were generally just like a small group. In this case, it was a quartet playing. I think it was a mix of woodwinds and reeds, and they were playing one of the calmer road themes from the games. Later on, they play a song that I have no idea where it comes from, but it's from a creepier area, and it's just violins.
Right.
Which is pretty neat. So it's nothing like it's not being presented as part of the main project or anything, but it adds to the vibes of the whole concert.
Helps stay together.
Yeah. As for the interlude, that's about it.
Yeah.
So, the Hoenn Maritime Travelogue, Suite for Orchestra, as they titled it.
So I'm going to just come out with a complaint real quick before we start with the actual, talking about the music. And that is, one of the songs was clearly mislabeled. Because on the YouTube description, the number was 118, but on the, mostly Japanese subtitles indicating the song title on the video, I can see the number is 119. I don't know what song this is. So I don't know if it's around 118 or 119. Yay! Anyway, just wanted to point that out. One way or the other, it's mislabeled. I don't know which one is mislabeled, but...
Yeah.
Well, no, it's like in Warriors Orochi and Dynasty Warriors. The number is different depending on the language.
Oh, God. I don't think that's true, but okay.
It isn't.
I know it isn't.
Yeah. That... I don't remember the... Or better yet, in my mind, I don't differentiate that well one route from another in the games, so I cannot tell which of the numbers was correct. All I can say is it was certainly one of the route themes, because those are the ones with numbers.
It was. It absolutely was. I guarantee you it was a route theme.
And in fact, that was mostly routes theme with, I believe, 1 or 2 dungeon explorations.
They had the full track list in the YouTube description, so...
Yeah, they had the... for this part, they had the surf theme. Some routes, I think mostly maritime routes, fitting the theme, of course. And for the first movement to Slateport, it ends on the theme to the Slateport city.
I thought the music was pretty good here. I liked the waltz that started it off. I thought that was very nice.
Yeah, that's
soothing and wavy.
Yeah. I have soothing right there in my notes, so we're definitely on the same page there. I also said it sounds a little like a Heavensward Fields theme. Like, it has that same level of energy where it isn't quite as melodic as later expansions of FF14, but still has enough energy for me to pay attention to it, unlike ARR's field themes. So it kind of fit into that sort of sweet spot energy-wise. Remember how I said it was vibe listening? That's one of the things that popped into my head.
Yeah.
The medley did a very good job of switching between time signatures. I saw it going between 3/4 and 4/4 quite a bit without it feeling jarring.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even notice that.
I mean, I'd almost call that a
Probably
good sign, because usually that is something you pay attention to.
Yeah. Usually it really pops out and it's very jarring. This time it was seamless.
Yeah. So, good job on the arranger on that front.
Yeah. Which, incidentally, I don't think we have confirmation if the same guy arranged the entire concert, but at one point they named one Tatsuro Tamura as their lead arranger. So I'm assuming he was the arranger for everything here.
I have my doubts of that, and I'll explain why later.
That's fair. That's fair.
Basically, how this was arranged and how a later segment was arranged are so radically different that I'm not convinced that that's one person involved in all of this.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I have an idea of what you might be talking about. But,
I'll just say it. Going into the Hoenn battle remixes, that was almost unarranged. It was almost like, here's a song, here's a song, here's a song, here's a song, here's a song.
Yeah.
Whereas this one had a lot more flow to it. This one and a couple of the early ones.
Although it wasn't continuous throughout the suite.
It isn't fully continuous, but it's more so than the later one, which is why I think there's more than one person involved in the arrangement here, because the styles are just very different. Whether or not one's better or worse is entirely subjective, but they're not the same, that's for sure.
Yeah, the first half of the concert, I'd say, feels more like they're trying to make new orchestra pieces out of the short songs from the GBA, versus the second half of the concert where it's a more direct translation in a way. But for the Maritime Travelogue, as they call, I did enjoy how they bookended it with the surf theme.
Yeah.
Because it's the waltz at the start and the waltz at the end of the third movement. Those are the surf theme. And the surf theme, I think, at least in every generation I played, I haven't played every generation of Pokemon by any means, but the ones I've played, the surf theme always sounded really cool, and it's really hard to make it sound bad, and I'm glad they didn't. It sounds really, really soothing, really nice. And I
soothing,
love
but
the
still with an energy that it's the sweet spot again.
Yeah, it's soothing, but it's not. You're not stopped. You are still in movement.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I also really enjoyed the occasional use of tubular bells.
I got to give a big shout out to the percussion section. They were very good.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure quite why, but I think the tubular bells fit with the Slateport City theme really well for me. Mostly based on like the vibes of the city in this case, because Slateport City is a beach city and it has a huge lighthouse. So it kind of, I guess it's the sense of scale in a way.
Right.
Might have been that, but it worked really, really nicely. And then the Oceanic Museum, which was the second movement, was a single song. I always forget this Oceanic Museum is a thing, but I like the music for it. The piano in particular was really lovely.
Unfortunately, I didn't have the 3 movements, so my notes are a bit for the whole suite. But I noted after the first soothing wavy notes that we moved on pretty naturally to something more cheerfully adventurous, to the point where it almost sounded by the end like an ad jingle. Somehow that was the picture that went into my head of
Interesting.
like the kind of music you'd hear in an ad. It had that kind of energy. And then they moved on with what sounded to me almost like an other intro that just made my mind go blank completely. And then I got woken up by Route 104, which is a nice little jaunty theme, which would go perfectly in our March's episode. But there was another
That
Pokemon
was the
song
one that
there.
sounded like Rufus's theme to start with?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to bring that one up, so thank you.
You're welcome. That's Route 104 then. And then they moved to another route, which left little impression, but then there was the Victory Road theme, which is very sweet, and what mainly left me at this point was like the unifying theme, because they all routes, so they had a theme from game elements, but when it came to music, it felt a bit tonally going up and down for me.
It was
which
definitely all over the place. I don't necessarily think that's a
Yeah.
bad thing, though. I'm kind of reminded of... I'm going to say this a couple times. I'm kind of reminded of the Zelda suite from the Score concert that Eddie gave to us last year, I think. That one had a very similar up and down energy.
Yeah, it almost felt at times like there were these weren't 7 suite but 7 mini concerts.
I can see that.
Because they all had their intros, their endings, just with different kind of themes more than energies. It each has a little bit of everything. And again, a little bit of everything very competently.
I do think that sometimes the fact that it's clear it's different songs actually works to its favor for the concert, in my opinion, because it reflects the experience you would have in the game, transitioning from one song to another. This suite, when it happens, it's not quite that. That was mostly in the third movement called the Seafaring. I did get that vibe of sort of the third movement was basically 5 different songs, not quite as well connected as the first and second movement were. But I enjoyed it still. I liked how the Victory Road theme slot in really well into what I think was otherwise mostly just a C route, and the brass shows up again in the third movement, and again much less annoying with an actual orchestra when compared to the awful trumpets of the GBA.
Yeah, that was my ultimate point, that and I don't remember for which one I noted that, but I explicitly put the sound of... Yeah, there we go, in the battle remixes. It's pretty brass heavy as per the game's reputation, but sounds way better in a talented orchestra than on a Game Boy Advance sound chip.
I noted that down pretty much every time I heard brass here.
Rana, you're going to love this.
Yes.
During the battle
Go on.
remixes, my exact line from my notes. I will say this, the horn section is doing a really great job of control. They're not overpowering the rest of the orchestra. Even without knowing these songs, I caught that.
Incredible!
There you go.
Yeah!
Honestly, to give you an idea, Galen, in the original GBA version, not just the battle themes, but a lot of route themes as well, sometimes it sounds like a mariachi band broke up and the dude in the trumpet is just playing it alongside you as you walk around.
I'm reminded
the
of
strength of
the
the trumpet.
Kirby gourmet race meme that Rana threw at us once upon a time. I think for the trumpets episode.
Well, yeah, and it certainly exists as well for Hoenn, as well as other evocative videos and pictures.
Now, I will say this, for the Maritime Travelogue, what was labeled on the video is 120. I can't really trust the label, but what it was labeled as Route 120, I've heard that one somewhere before. I found that one familiar. I'm not sure why. Maybe an OC Remix album or something, but that melody line, I've heard it before. I don't know if that was like Victory Road or whatever that was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, like, some songs I felt more familiar with, so it's probable that some themes are reused from game to game.
Given that
Which
I've only,
is a good thing, by the way.
given that I've only played Sword, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, and Legends, I'm not really an expert on this.
I think also the first 3 generations of Pokemon have a lot of nostalgia factor to them. So they are often used in ROM hacks. So maybe you've heard it in a ROM hack.
True, that absolutely could be a Super Mario World Kaizo track.
That's also a possibility that I hadn't considered. You're right.
Yeah. Shall we move on to Aqua vs. Magma?
Sure. So I have a few notes that I'm just going to throw all out there at once. And it's going to... I'm actually going to give my conclusion pretty early, because I feel like I need to get it out of the way. My first little just side note, the Mount Chimney theme is trying way too hard to be FF6's battle theme. That was the first thing out of the gate I caught.
Never drew the parallel myself.
It just, I had that trumpet from FF6 riding rent-free in my head during that part.
See what we're talking about, trumpet?
Yes, but FF6's battle theme is actually good. Like, really good.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so here's my kind of point. And this is where my version of Mod's collection actually kind of smacked me in the face. I'm just going to read my notes verbatim. Honestly, all of the second suite kind of bores me. Pokemon's battle themes are okay by and large, but nothing I can really get hyped over. I think this is one case where Shin Megami Tensei really spoils me. I just can't get into these songs. I think I have a certain expectation for battle music from Mon collection games, and this just didn't even come close, which is kind of unfortunate. So that's just kind of where I'm at on this one. These all kind of blended together after Mount Chimney.
There's a lot of other themes that are probably more involved than I imagine more to your liking. But yeah, especially at this time, they hadn't really broken free from doing things that are very close to the original battle themes at time.
Yeah, I think like late into the next generation is where they start to actually experiment more with varying more the battle themes.
Yeah.
It's
a bit like Phoenix Wright. Even if you train to do 5 variations on corners, you're not beating the original.
Yeah, and like, I think Gen 1 only had like 3 battle theme variations. Gen 2 and 3 had a few more, but they all sound very similar to one another.
Yes.
Even I have a hard time telling them apart. The later battles of Gen 4 and in Gen 5 especially is where they start to actually differentiate and make more unique battle themes. So I don't blame you, because I also find the battle themes kind of okay in the first few games.
Yeah, but anyway, we do start with the fight, which makes sense for the theme of the suite, and then other stuff that I don't remember where it was originally from. Could be an evil lair or something.
Yes, so the full title of this suite, as given in English, was Team Aqua vs. Team Magma Aftermath of the Strife, a symphonic poem. So basically, the idea seems to be that it starts at their fight, and the rest is what happens after their fight, after they realize that both sides are wrong and are doing things the wrong way. So you hear a lot of stuff from the Cave of Origin, which is where you find...
That's where it gets spooky.
Yeah, you can hear from a theme from the Cave of Origin, which, if I recall correctly, is where you find your game's legendary. You also hear
or like the pearl for the other. Something.
Yeah, Also, the Sutopolis city theme, which is the final city you visit, and one where you can only fight the gym leader after you finish the main story with Team Aqua and Team Magma.
And is one of the coolest city design.
Oh, I love it. It looks really pretty. And the theme here is very pleasant. Like, their version of the Sutopolis city, it gains energy as it goes on, but it starts so pleasant. And also, tubular bells, this time actually adapting bells from the original game, where the bells were basically used as a, if I recall correctly, it was basically like signaling the scale of the legendaries with Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza. And here you don't have regular bells, but you have the tubular bells, pretty much doing the same thing. They're signaling the coming of these giants after Aqua and Magma's battle.
Gotta love some bells to herald some apocalypses.
Somehow, For Whom the Bell Tolls from Metallica just popped into my head. I wonder why.
I was thinking Hell's Bells from AC/DC, but that works too.
But yeah, I don't have that much more to say about the suite. Because again, it had a narrative theme, but following it meant going from a battle to intrigue to spookiness to apocalypse.
Yeah,
And it was a bit hard to follow without having the reference in mind, which again is the aspect of the orchestra being by fans for fans. If you kind of losing it on the references, there's an aspect that doesn't click necessarily as well.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the two suites that would benefit the most from having original bits of music linking the video game tracks during the suite.
That could help.
That probably wouldn't hurt. I'm not sure it would have helped my perception of it all that much, but it would have helped for sure.
I think, at least for me, it would have helped because they're trying to tell a story here, and so depending on what they were to compose, they could link those themes in a way that helps tell this story. Or maybe they could have divided this one into multiple movements. This one was a single movement. I'm not sure, but I enjoyed the way they adapted things. But I do think that it could have been a little bit better in terms of arrangement for a more general audience and for a storytelling song. Because there's a reason they called this a symphonic poem. They really meant this as storytelling.
Yeah. And I will personally say that if they meant this as storytelling, this feels like it fell a bit short of the mark. Because I'm not sure what I was meant to understand from this.
Yeah, I think that's a situation like Rena said. This is for fans by fans for fans, and if you don't know the story of the game, much less the songs that they're bringing into it, it really will not make sense.
Yeah.
And even my memory isn't that great. I know those themes were used because it was in the credits. I don't remember the Cave of Origin theme off the top of my head, but I appreciate how they used it here. But for a more general audience, it does lack something to link the themes.
Now, I will say at this point of the discussions, and if you'll allow me to use that occasion to transition nicely to the next theme, or the next suit, the Dragonade, they make the story sound like a much grander affair than it is by itself, because even when discussing the story, oh yes, that was the Cave of Origination, and this was what announced the apocalypse from the Crater City. but at the core of it, it's still a silly story about one blue gang that says sea good, earth bad, and one red gang that is earth bad, sea good.
Yeah.
No, the opposite.
This is still early generation Pokemon. This is still I want to be the very best territory. There is not much storytelling going on here.
Yes. But they sure bring the dramatic feel with the Draconic. The concerto really helps things
This was
look
by far
like
and away my
grand
favorite
affair.
part. This was my favorite suite by a wide margin. I really enjoyed this, just in terms of performance. This violinist was great.
This is the part where I joined Galen, because this comes from the remakes. So it was entirely new to me. I did really enjoy it as well. The violinist was also their main maestro. His violin seemed a bit out of tune at first. He later, I think between movements 2 and 3, he takes a moment to tune it a bit better.
There was a tuning going on, for sure.
It sounds a lot better in the final movement and in the next piece.
Live, everybody.
But exactly, and amateur.
Yeah, I mean amateur, yes, but not amateur. This was clearly a professional orchestra.
Yeah, like this. It's basically like the moment that makes you remember. Oh yeah, right. They are technically amateurs, because I've completely forgot up until now.
So I'm just gonna let you know this because this happens to hardcore professionals. The third ever Nightwish concert I ever saw, they accidentally sent the click track to the audience somehow. These things happen.
You're talking about that. Yeah.
I'm sure I brought it up before because it's one of those egregious moments where it's like, wow, that is a major mistake. This is a professional band that by this point had been touring for 20 years. These things happen. And a slightly out of tune violin is by nowhere near the worst mistake I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, like I definitely don't mean it as a slight against them. It's just you usually don't see it happening, so it does catch your attention when everything else prior to it sounded and was extremely professional. But it happens, like, and they were also streaming live.
And with a less trained ear like myself, I didn't even notice it, not gonna lie.
And they were also streaming live on YouTube, from what I could catch from the host's conversation. So this was kind of potentially their biggest concert yet, maybe? Because I don't know if they streamed the previous one.
It's worth researching because again, these guys are great and are worth experiencing and supporting. Even if I, as not a Pokemon fan, didn't get quite as much out of the music, I still very much enjoyed the effort and the energy put into the performance, as I've said a lot. Like, I cannot stress this enough. This is good stuff. Like, yes, we want more of this. I also liked the arrangements, like, melodically, I guess I would say, better here than I did the previous suite. I don't know if that's just the nature of the violin lead, or they took more liberties with the arrangement. I couldn't tell you, but...
I imagine they had to take liberties to make it work within the framework of a concerto.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I imagine it's probably a mix of them taking more liberties with this one, plus this being a part of the story that in the original release was very short, but in the remakes was made much longer, and they took from the remakes here, as the host explained. Because this is basically, like, if we're to look at this as the plot of the game, this comes right after the previous one, and it's where you go after Rayquaza to fix the mess made by the other two legendaries. Hence the Draconid, because he's that huge dragon looking like Quetzalcoatl from the Aztec myth.
I have so many different images in my head right now. We're not going to get anywhere with this, I'm afraid.
It's Pokemon. That's par for the course. Let's be honest. But yeah,
like I think big dragon Pokemon. I don't even think a dragon type. I just think Charizard.
That's fair. But yeah, this one, in the original, you basically just climb a tower in the middle of nowhere and you throw Pokeballs until you catch the guy. In the remakes, apparently, there's a whole mini plot to let you reach Rayquaza in the first place. And that's where they pick the music from.
Okay. Sure. Honestly, like, yeah, this was... again, I really enjoyed actually listening to this one. This is probably my favorite musical section overall.
I also liked here, if the credits are entirely complete, let's say, and they aren't missing any pieces from the suite, the third movement here, they call the Ascension, is just a single track, and it's a battle theme. And I think you probably have noticed the difference between this battle theme and every other battle theme in the concert.
It didn't even sound like a battle theme to my ears. It was just part of the whole.
Yeah, this comes, again, only from the remakes, so that probably plays a part into it.
Yeah, newer composers, more experienced, yeah.
Also more, better sound chip and all that. Plus, whatever changes they made in the arrangement here, I really like the way it implied stakes and drama in a battle without just being the generic, overly energetic Gen 3 battle theme.
Alright, well, since we seems to have reached a conclusion on discussing the Draconade Concerto for Violin and Orchestra, shall we move on to Aspera Ad Astra then?
So I actually wrote this title wrong because I wrote it the normal way, which is Ad Astra per Aspera.
That checks out.
Yeah. And my only note on this is I don't see Una Riley or Kristen Wright anywhere. Una Riley being number 1 in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and Kristen Wright being an Arknight's character who her whole thing was going to space. So, yeah, the only thing I got out of this one at all was referencing other stuff. This one left no impression on me whatsoever.
It's more grandiosity right after the previous one, so that helps echo things. And what it reminded me of was the Skyrim launch, when people made physical travelogues to chronicle their incredible adventure, disregarding, as society somehow always does, that this was an Elder Scrolls game at launch. But you know, my focus here isn't on how people are stupid, they forget the Bethesda bugs, but I more mean the part where it's wonderful that people can look at pixels on a tiny GBA screens moving in a tiny thing and picture this grand adventure extrapolating itself again and again. It's a celebration of the power of imagination, if anything else.
That's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah, this is another one that was pretty new to me. I really don't think I ever heard this one. Based on the title, I'm guessing must have something to do with Deoxys, which is an alien. Like, literally a Pokemon that's an alien.
That's not the only one.
I think it was the first one, at least.
Yes. BGM and LGF were in Gen 5.
Okay, then. But yeah, I particularly like the strings on this one. Both the soloist and the actual string section of the orchestra. They sounded really, really pleasant. But I don't think it's a song that stuck too much with me. Not to say it was bad, just didn't sound as unique as some of the others.
And it's funny because, again, this is something grandiose that hits high notes and everything, but the next song, Trick House, is just like 3 instruments going at it while the rest of the orchestra is away, and it left a much stronger impression.
Oh yeah, the melodic percussion exhibition. It's just really cute.
It was my favorite part of the concert.
It was up there for me too.
I love that they did that. I love that they did this during the interlude.
Yeah,
like,
I
orchestra
personally
needs
like
a break.
the Draconin a little better, but like this was definitely a highlight for me.
And it's funny because during the first or second track, I distinctly remember looking and was like, where's the xylophone? I don't think they have one. Oh, that's so sad.
Well,
turns out it was in the interlude.
There you go. This was adorable. This was just really good. And these players were really solid. Like, I'm actually going to skip to the second one of these, Dive, which I'll admit I did make the too much water joke here in my notes. But I will say
bound to happen.
There was a triangle player in the percussionist picked up a triangle for this part and not for Trick House. That, again, triangle is another one of those instruments that just because of its frequency position cuts through. This guy had a lot of control and was being very careful not to overpower the rest of the instruments.
I feel it did get a bit overpowering as a whole late in Dive.
Unfortunately, that's something that happens. It's a triangle. They do this.
Yeah, and if anything, the fact that this was as a whole may have meant that the rest of the instrument of the instrument players kind of caught onto it and caught up real quick, which is impressive to at least make the whole seem cohesive. Even though this meant that what starts as a pretty relaxing underwater tune and a little more hard by the end than it was probably meant to be, but overall, wonderful little parts.
Yeah, I thought these two songs were really fun. Really liked the performances.
Yeah, I couldn't remember, like, the Trick House in particular is a theme that I really don't remember at all. The Dive theme is one that at first I couldn't picture it, like, I couldn't hear it in my mind, but as soon as they started playing the first few notes, I went, yep, oh, that's it. Instantly remember, and impeccable playing. It's just a really, really fun interlude. I wish we'd hear more like this from other orchestras.
Yeah, have a little fun.
Yeah, like the orchestra's taking a break. This is the moment where we don't need to be all serious and formal. Let's have some fun.
And in the end, I think "Let's Have Some Fun" was kind of the core of this concert, because by fans for fans. That's very evident throughout this whole thing. And while I don't necessarily agree with all of the arrangement decisions, there's no point where I didn't think. There's no point where I thought someone didn't want to be here or was otherwise here for a paycheck. Like, it was pretty clear that everyone was very interested in making this thing happen.
They're here because they really like Third Gen. Good for them.
And the fact that this orchestra has been going on for at least these 4 concerts is a testament to the fun they have, I guess.
Plus repetitions. I mean, I can barely get 5 people going for a tabletop night these days. I can't imagine assembling an orchestra like that.
Yeah, these are a bunch of very passionate people.
Yeah.
And I honestly thought there were a lot of like Pokemon plushies all around the stage that I thought was very cute, kind of adding to the ambiance in a way that I thought was nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think is what also really something that was also really, really fun was that
and something
about
that
a third of the orchestra was dressed as Team Aqua, a third as Team Magma. Then a few were dressed as like key characters from the game, like some gym leaders, some Elite Four members, and then you had some guys dressed as Pokemon, which incidentally at the top I mentioned there was a brief interlude where they played one of the root themes in just woodwinds and reeds, and the four guys playing were all dressed as Pokemon. They were the three starters, and I think Wurmple is the name, which is basically the Gen 3 version of Caterpie.
Oh,
And
yeah, I've seen those in the other games.
Yeah, the host even makes fun of it. Like, he's talking about how about the iconic Pokemon, Trico, Mudkip, Torchic, and Wurmple.
I did see somebody, one of the violinists dressed in a really awkward costume, and I'm like, I don't know how you're playing with that thing on. I gotta be honest. That feels like that would get in the way of actually playing your instrument.
The character designs for Gen 3 got a bit wild sometimes.
That's reminded me mainly of Pixelphonia, which is a French orchestra that does also video game music. More franchises are generally covered, even in the latest tour, which is themed around the Link's Awakening remake and structured as a choose-your-own-adventure concert, but has other songs from other games as part of the setlist, depending on the choices made by the public. Also, it has rhythm minigames, somehow, for the audience, but they also tend to come to the concert with accessories or costumes, or at least a little hat, you know. Make it clear that everybody wants to be here and to have fun.
They're here for a bit of a serious time, but also a really fun time.
Yeah. It's a very fun times, which means it has to be taken seriously.
That's fair.
So we then move on to the battle remixes section, which has fit in my perception of this concert as choosing to group by game items rather than by a cohesive musical energy, starts with an intro to a battle theme rather than a battle theme. Because it wants to ramp up and settle down. Like I said, 7 mini concerts.
Yeah, I think this is one of 2 or 3 suites where I think they went for sort of partially emulating the player experience.
Yeah, and so they started at When the Eyes Meet.
Yeah. When this suite started, I was really enjoying it. I think the main problem is the battle themes in Gen 3 are so similar that as the suite went on, it started getting stale.
Yeah, it felt like it looped a couple of times, even though it was all different themes.
Yeah, I did enjoy the Deoxys theme. I never got to battle Deoxys in a game because he was an event-only Pokemon in Gen 3, and I never played the remake where I think he's not event-only, but I'm not sure. So I enjoyed the sense of drama and mystery in the Deoxys theme, but overall, really just it's not on the orchestra or the arranger. It's on the original compositions not being varied enough.
Yeah. And especially with themes that are originally as brass heavy, it can make things feel a little ponderous and plodding at times. Like, sure, it's a battle, it's got the energy of a battle, but you're still going boom, 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 boom. Okay, I get it.
At the very least, I'm very glad we didn't get the trumpets.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Okay, I get it. Was kind of my whole vibe throughout this particular suite. I got very little from this one.
And it's also weird because they don't even maintain the battle theme energy overall, because every time they pick up some speed and then they return to another intro, and then they ramp up a little and hard pause, and it's kind of preventing any momentum from really building up.
Yeah. I don't know. This was my least favorite segment of the show. I felt this one to be the least interesting, both musically and energy-wise. Obviously, I don't know much about... Again, I don't know much about Pokemon, so I'm just listening to it. I just found myself... I don't know. Not great.
Yeah.
I think there's one piece in the encores that I enjoyed less, mostly because it's not made for me. It's not my style of song, the original song. But as far as being interesting, this series of battle remixes is probably the least interesting part of the concert.
Then how about we move to the ending themes?
Yeah, they kind of played the ending theme twice. First as its own thing for an arrangement for strings and harp, and later it shows up as a full orchestra thing at the end of the next suite.
Now,
But,
I'm
go on.
just going to say this really quick. This is the one time where I felt the recording was actually kind of bad, because I found the harp to be comparatively inaudible. It was very hard to hear, even though it was supposed to be a featured instrument, which tells me they didn't really mic it as well as they could have. This was the only time in the concert I had this problem.
Huh. Weird, because it sounded very full to me, the harp, but maybe that was part of the issue, that it should be more subtle and that it was kind of filled out by the recording.
Now that's interesting, because I had trouble hearing it. I thought it was too weak, and you're saying it's too strong? How did we get here?
Not strong per se, it's more like strong would be height, and what I perceived was more about width, if that makes sense.
Not sure.
Audio is complicated.
Audio is complicated. I need to re-listen to this now, because this makes... Yeah, I wonder now if there's something weird with my speaker setup, because that should not... Is something audible is not really a question that should be debated like this. That seems strange.
Yes.
What I can say for my part is that there were a few moments where I could hear the harp very well, but it was either not very present in the arrangement elsewhere, or it was fairly low. So maybe they adjusted the recording sensitivity during the concert, during the performance.
That's possible.
I'm not sure. But yeah, when I could hear the harp, I really enjoyed the playing. I think the harpist did a really good job here. This is one of two songs where it's just not for me. I'm not huge on the ending themes for Pokemon games, but their arrangement I think was fine. I just think the harp sound was inconsistent, is how I would put it, because I could hear it sometimes, but not at all at other times.
Inconsistent can definitely be it.
Good word for it.
But what mostly confused me as a whole, again, is that after the ending theme, we have the Aeon flute, which absolutely sounds like an ending theme.
It even ends in a full orchestra rendition of the ending theme.
Yeah.
I think I have a hypothesis, let's say, for the Aeon Flute 2024, which is how they titled the suite, which is that I think they were trying to capture the vibe of revisiting the whole map in the remake. Because
Okay.
if memory serves me well, in the remake you get the Aeon Flute to call either Latios or Latias to fly you around. And this suite was mostly different city themes. And then the ending. So I think what they were going for was like a nostalgic revisit and then the true ending. Which again,
Which is
by
strange
fans
because
for fans.
an ending theme kind of already looks back at the territory crossed. So I guess they had the ending theme, then made an arrangement that works in a way an ending theme would, and then appending the ending theme to it.
That's funny. So I have an actual comment about the ending theme that we kind of didn't get a chance to talk about because we ended up talking about mixing somehow. And that is, again, the second time I find myself comparing this to something related to FF6, but this one's probably a lot more relevant, at least compositionally. In the FF6 Balance and Ruin remix album, which I brought up a few times on the show before, in fact, just last week, one of my oboe songs, they did a version of the ending thing that's just violin and piano. And it's this incredible, it's such a good minimalist variation. And that's kind of my gold standard for minimalist variations of these big ending themes. I didn't feel like the harp and strings ending theme hit that mark. But now that you tell me that this is part of the same sound, which I didn't recognize, the same music is part of this, I can't help but think that this kind of gets closer to what I would want to hear from an ending theme as opposed to the arrangement they did in the prior version of the track.
I think I agree with that. It was very short here. It took a very short amount of time. At the end, it was just like 5 seconds, maybe, at the very tail end of this suite.
Well, that would explain why I didn't recognize it.
Yeah, it wasn't the full song, but it did sound more. I guess full would be a word for it. Not that minimalism doesn't work, it just didn't quite hit as well this time.
Yeah. Minimalism is very hard to do right, especially if the original version is this big over-the-top thing.
It's a very complicated thing to do.
Yeah, it is. So when it's done right, it does stick in my brain hard. I think in this case, from what I'm hearing, like, I liked this way better than basically everything since the interlude, the Trickhausen Dive. This is where I started to get back into the concert again, and I'm like, it does occur to me that I definitely prefer field themes for Pokemon over battle themes, like, just flat out.
Oh yeah, like, the first two gens, I really didn't like the battle themes.
For the early ones, they certainly leave stronger impressions. Now then, how about that encore?
Yeah, so for the encores, they decided to play into the anime, which, honestly, very interesting choice. I think very, very clever.
Well, the first one, Advanced Adventure, that's from, like, a GBA version, right? Like, Advanced?
The season based on the GBA games was called Pokemon Advanced or something like that.
Oh.
I think it was actually Pokemon Advanced Adventure.
Oh, okay then. That explains that then. Got it.
Yeah. So from what I haven't watched this season, and even if I had watched, I would have gotten a Brazilian adaptation of the American opening by 4Kids. Because that's how anime worked at the time over here. We got Pokemon through the US, basically. But according to the host, this was the opening theme for the Advanced Adventure season. So an orchestrated version of the opening theme to the anime.
It was cute. I didn't really have too much to say about it other than it's cute. I like the first one a lot. didn't have much of an opinion of the second one. It just felt like scoring. Like, well, this sounds like it's from a movie.
So the first one, the first encore, Advanced Adventure, I think it sounded really neat and was very fittingly adventurous at times, which I imagine worked really well with the anime as an opening. The second encore, Make a Wish, was from, I think, the fourth or fifth movie. I think it's called Junichi, the Wishmaker, something like that.
Good, I'll check out.
That's the song I was talking about earlier when I said there was an encore that just wasn't made for me. This is the one. It's just not the kind of music I'm particularly interested in.
I like the little shake it had. But yeah, other than that, the Advanced Adventure theme, it was nice and sprightly, but overall, at this point, I feel like I'm out of commands, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what else to say here. That's the problem. Like, as you said, I'm just kind of out of comments. It was good, but I think the good stuff kind of was from the earliest parts and the back half.
I would say that, like, the good stuff is all throughout. The interesting stuff was in the earlier parts.
That's a better way of putting it. Thank you.
Yeah. And at this point, it's music that's interesting in its selection because it's from the anime and the movie, but for its execution, it's fine as the orchestra does because it's a talented orchestra.
And it's kind of hard to fully review the performance when I haven't heard the originals.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also don't have much to say here. But this further reinforces the whole by fans for fans, because most Pokemon fans just absorb every media that Pokemon appears in. Outside of some Pokemon fans not playing the TCG. So them including the anime and movies, I think that tracks. Like, I'm not as huge on Pokemon nowadays, but I used to be as a kid, and I watched the first 3 movies religiously.
Yeah, like, one of the things that distinguishes Pokemon the most is the fact that it manages to do a lasting cross-media franchise, which many have tried, but few have succeeded in.
That is true. Like, even as someone who myself isn't a fan, it's not like I don't know Pokemon. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And I'm glad it's even in concert halls because of a bunch of passionate fans.
And
it was a nice concert.
yeah.
Even if I was a little bit confused at the set list and the ordering of the suits at times.
I think, for my part, as a final note to go on, let's say, I really appreciate their attempt at not just playing the songs straight, but trying to tell stories through the songs by making those sweet. They didn't always hit the mark with us, but I appreciate the fact that they tried something interesting. They didn't just play the songs as found in the soundtrack album or something.
I'll always respect more somebody that tried and things didn't land to somebody that just goes through the motions, you know?
And hey, probably landed for someone who's a bigger Pokemon fan than the 3 of us.
And yes, Galen, I realize what I'm saying is strange given my taste for Motoi Sakuraba music.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one. Try something and fail rather than just phone it in every time.
Yeah.
In terms of the musical choices, I'm still very mixed on this one. I don't think that's going to change. But in terms of just the sheer ability to deliver good sounding stuff, the performances, the just capability of these performers, the sheer fun they were having doing it, like, yes, bring on more of this, 100%. I don't care if it isn't perfect. It's great.
Alright then. I think on that, and before Discord explodes even more.
Yes.
Because yes, that cut mid your sentence as well.
Great.
Let's take refuge in Music Arcade Now Play.
So, Eddie, you've been gone a while, so I think you got a lot to catch up on. Let's lightning round this bad boy.
Oh boy, yeah. So last time I was around was the Dawn Trail special. We didn't have a Now playing. And the last time prior to that was, what, April? Maybe March? So
It's been a year, huh?
Yeah. 2024 has been quite the thing.
Captain, it's only Monday.
Yeah, but more or less, yeah. Things are getting better because I'm going to the gym more often, so my anxiety is lowering. But,
Good.
It's a process. I kept my list for Now playing to just games that I have at least something to say about the music, because I have played a lot of games, including games that just the soundtrack is the same as it was the last time I mentioned them or something. So I have 4 games I wanna talk about later. First, a quick fire, rapid fire round. Islands of Insight. Last time I mentioned this game, I mentioned it about because I couldn't run it when I had the demo in early 2024.
Okay.
Turns out the issue was I didn't have enough RAM. I upgraded from 16 gigabytes to 64.
16 wasn't enough RAM? Wow, okay.
My GPU also has very little VRAM.
That
doesn't help.
That doesn't help, yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine I couldn't have run it at the time, but since my own upgrade, I should try it, because now I possibly could, and I have it since there was a time where there was just like, here's the game at 100% sale.
Yeah, that's when I got it as well, because I wasn't sure I could run it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the soundtrack is basically exactly what I said it was probably going to be when I mentioned the game last time, which is very new agey, very calming, because it's a lot of different puzzles, so it shouldn't be very distracting. I dig it. I 100% understand if it's not for you. Next game on the list, Horizon Zero Dawn, because it got a PC release.
Yay!
I haven't managed to play too much of it because this is a game that really doesn't lend itself well to short play sessions.
No.
And short play sessions is basically what I can do nowadays. But what I've heard so far was very pleasant. I love the sound of the cellos when they kick in. I sadly don't really have any song stuck in my head. But again, I haven't played much at all.
I played this whole game. I platinumed it. I still don't remember a single note of this soundtrack. I may need to replay it and try again.
I do tend to enjoy the style they went for more than you do. So
you do like your atmospheric, yeah.
Yeah, I might have some songs that will stick with me, but I haven't played enough to hear enough. So it's up in the air right now. Next one, Tales and Tactics. It's a roguelike auto battler with both a single player and a multiplayer mode.
I don't tend to enjoy the genre of auto battler, but I looked into this one because those were the devs that made that one huge mod for Slay the Spire, and that's how I learned of it.
Oh, I didn't realize that. But
yeah, Slay the Spire Ascension, I think.
Yeah, I think that's it. I usually in times of stress, let's say, I gravitate to games where I don't need to think too much, and auto battlers are naturally among those genres. So I definitely went in going, I know exactly what this is. I enjoyed the game. The soundtrack, it's basically we have Hearthstone at home. That's the best way I can put it. Like, it's Hearthstone does it better. It's that we're at an inn in the medieval fantasy vibe, but not as effective as Hearthstone.
To be fair, Hearthstone has some of the best tavern music there is.
Yeah, they dragged some from WoW, I think, plus added a few more that are really excellent for that vibe.
Oh yeah.
So it's not really a slight on Tales and Tactics, but it does mean that the soundtrack is not very memorable and
Hasn't
not
left the
as
strongest impression, yes.
Yeah. Next game, also one I got basically because I needed games with that I didn't need to think too hard when playing. Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission.
Oh, good. Given the ordering, I thought you were going to talk about Age of Empires 3, and I was like, what? Excuse me?
Oh, yeah,
yes.
no. Age of Empires.
Game to turn my brain off.
Age of
Strategy games.
Completely casual, that one. Yeah, no. So, Super Dragon Ball Heroes, it's a card game, mostly single player. It has gacha mechanics, but you don't use real money.
Okay.
It's basically trying to emulate the experience of playing the arcade in Japan, where you would buy cards and play those cards in the arcade, in an arcade machine.
Interesting.
And so part of that process is emulating the purchasing of those cards, which you do through a gachapon. All I can say about the soundtrack is that there's a reason they have DLCs for the anime soundtrack.
No.
It exists. That's all I can say.
It exists.
Yeah. Now, next up is what I like to call the I totally didn't get affected by the Summer Olympics this year, no siree block. Starting with Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition, where I played a lot as the French. And for the record, yes, I did revolt as the French into revolutionary France and then into Napoleonic France, because that is an option.
Wonderful.
But yeah, the game keeps getting new civilizations, and each civilization has their own themes and such. I continue to enjoy that because I'm the guy who loves listening to the sounds of different cultures, so you guys know me. The second half of this, I totally didn't get influenced by the Olympics block, is Assassin's Creed Unity. Which, first of all, a quick side note, it hasn't been officially confirmed by the IOC, but pretty much everyone who watched the opening ceremony went, that's an assassin, because they had a character with a white hood, a blue cloak, not a cloak, but a coat, similar in color to Arno from Assassin's Creed Unity, and he was doing parkour through the entire opening ceremony.
Look, let's just say that the word of the IOC, I trust Ubisoft's word more than them. So if they don't confirm it, but anyone else says that's an assassin, it's an assassin to me, too.
And I think Ubisoft posted on LinkedIn saying that they did get influenced by Ubisoft. So
absolutely.
The fact that it wasn't the only influence. They were also influenced by the Phantom of the Opera, quite a few
yes,
works
there are convergent images.
Yeah, a lot of French literature also influenced the character. So the fact that this is the second Summer Olympics in a row where games are being treated as a valid form of art, and in this case, they are on par with the most classic works of French literature, that's a win for fans of video games, even if you don't like Assassin's Creed.
For sure. I'm not a fan of Assassin's Creed, but I'm super happy with everything you just said, so.
And for fans of heavy metal, you bet I was listening for the original version of Aspera on this game.
Oh, yeah.
And I found it.
Shocking.
A very strong R.
It is so cool to hear it in its, let's say, natural habitat.
Ah, ça ira, ça ira, ça ira. Le peuple en ce jour sans cesse répète. Ah, ça ira, ça ira, ça ira. Malgré les mutins, tout réussira.
Yes, that.
Yes.
But yeah, I've already talked about the proper soundtrack. It's two halves, one by John Tilton, which is one by Sarah Schachner, which I love. That hasn't changed. I just hadn't paid as much attention to the folk songs in my prior playthrough, which I did now, and I really enjoyed them. Now, moving away from the Olympics, Destiny 2, The Final Shape, I actually haven't been playing it for a while now, but it came out since the last time I was on a regular episode of the podcast, so I may as well talk about it.
Sure.
It's probably by most metrics the best expansion the game's ever received, including Destiny 1. And as the closing of the one saga the game's had so far, the soundtrack draws a lot of motifs from the previous expansions as callbacks. I haven't played the game for long enough to recognize all the motifs, but I've seen people online doing bingos where they were doing a listening party to the soundtrack, and they had a bingo sheet of all the motifs. The Guardian motif, check. Which I mostly didn't know the Guardian had a motif, the Guardian being the player character.
Right.
But yeah, it also has a song that will be on the playlist for this episode, which is called After All This Time, which honestly the title has a few meanings. This is a song that plays at the very, very end of the story, in a scene where it's just you, your ghost, which is the little robot thing that resurrects you, and you are looking at the Traveler, which is the source of your powers. And it's just this peaceful vista, and the song in the background. The first meaning for the title is, of course, after all this time, the battle is over.
Right.
The second meaning for this track is, of course, after all this time, here's an actual ending proper to a story. The third meaning, as I found out, is that a version of this song by Michael Salvatore was apparently previewed about 5 or 6 years ago, and now they've used the full version of the song. So after all this time, the song is finally in the game, basically, is the third reading of the title.
That's build up.
Yeah. The campaign is also very linear compared to the other expansions. The way Destiny 2 expansions work, usually you get a destination to visit, which is comprised of like 3 mostly circular-ish areas. They are connected by loading zones, and you travel between them. They kind of form sort of a triangle on the map. This time, the destination you're exploring is a straight line from your origin point to the fortress of the Big Bad. And so the soundtrack ends up being a bit closer to a score than usual.
Turns out the final shape was a straight line.
Kind of, I suppose. But yeah, it was a really neat approach to a new expansion, and while this style of soundtrack is not the style that I would listen to on my own time, I appreciate them doing something different, because this expansion was something very different from the previous one. It was much more linear. The next game on the list, Age of Mythology Retold, because of course I would buy a Retold.
Yep.
I played countless hours of this game when I was a teenager. Of course I would buy the remake. It is
How's the remake?
really good.
Excellent.
The balance is a bit weird right now. There's a huge difference in win rate between people who are not pros and people who are, in the sense of, if you look at each god's win rate, for the general populace, it's mostly around 50%. if you look at the pros, pretty much 60 to 70% win rate with Thor.
Oh.
So that doesn't affect me because I am not a pro. I am on the general popular side of this comparison.
Although talking about pro is very topical since I believe right now is a big Age of Empires tournament with 2, 4, and some mythology matches as well, that's organized in a Spanish castle.
I didn't know it was on a Spanish castle, but yes, the Red Bull Wololo, as they call it.
Yes, Wololo Arenado.
Yeah, it's Age of Empires Definitive Edition 1, 2, Age of Empires 4, and Age of Mythology Retold. I think it's like about to end. It's early October. As of the time this episode goes live, it will have ended already. There have already been 2 big patches and a few smaller ones. They are working to really make sure the game is balanced. And much like the Age of Empires Definitive Editions, Age of Mythology Retold has basically the original soundtrack, but arranged and made more high fidelity by a new composer.
Alright.
So it sounds pretty neat. It basically gets a glow up in the sound department just like it has in the graphics department.
Yeah. It's a coat of polish, not a reinvention.
Pretty much. And last but not least, Castlevania Dominos Collection, which suddenly dropped.
Yep, that was indeed sudden.
I have a feeling that Konami just woke up that day and realized, oh wait, we have things to do, because it was the same day they finally gave a release date to Suikoden 1+2 HD.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Dominos Collection, it's the 3 DS games, plus Haunted Castle, which was an arcade adaptation of the first Castlevania. It's very good. Like, the emulation is great. It finally makes Dawn of Sorrow my favorite Castlevania, because now you don't need to touch a screen to do those.
Accursed seals, yes.
Screw those magic seals. Now it's a QT on your controller. It's fine. It's okay. It's probably my favorite Castlevania now.
Okay.
But as far as soundtracks go, I realized that my favorite of the DS games is probably Portrait of Ruin, personally. Because I think it strikes the balance of vibes and also being actually interesting songs better than either Order of Ecclesia or Dawn of Sorrow. I remember more Portrait of Ruin songs.
Mm-hmm.
But the song I want to talk about isn't from them. It's from the remake of Haunted Castle, which is also on this collection. Haunted Castle Revisited, which has quite possibly either my favorite or one of my favorite renditions of Bloody Tears. It is great. They completely redid the soundtrack with what sounds like live instruments or either really good samples. And I really enjoy it, even though classic Castlevania isn't my style. But I don't need to play to hear it because it has a music player built into the main menu. So, hooray!
Great.
And thanks for being here for my TED Talk. That's my list.
Due to real life, my list is exactly one song long, and that is the new contingency contract. Yay! It's
Arknights.
Yay! It's good.
You're telling me you play Arknights? I never would have guessed.
It's almost like Rana made that exact same joke in pre-production or something.
It's almost like we make the joke every time you bring up Arknights or something.
It has good music, and at the moment it's the only thing I can talk about, unless you want me to talk about Neverspace 2 again, which I'm all too willing to do, but the soundtrack hasn't changed. It's still good synthwave.
It is.
It is. And yeah, Arknight, like, I mentioned it a lot when we did the concert. It's a game with a surprisingly good soundtrack and with
Yeah.
developers that care a surprisingly lot about the soundtrack.
Yeah, like right now my games list is Arknights, FF14, which we talked about at length, these exact songs I might add at length, and Everspace 2. Like I just don't have much going on. At least Arknights gave me some new music to talk about, and this
And apparently you have lined up a game for October that will shake things up a little.
yes, it's a Metroidvania, and that's all I know about it. It looks spooky. I'm going with spooky.
Excellent.
It was also $20 cheaper than Dominus Collection, which is why I haven't bought that yet.
Yeah,
That's fair.
that's fair.
Honestly, the main reason I bought the Dominus Collection was I was looking at my credit card bill. It had some room still. I looked at Steam. I went, you know what? I do need something that isn't an RTS or Destiny. And that was it.
Indeed. On my end, played a good amount of games given that I upgraded my computer and as such was incentivized to test a few things around. So, satisfactory. Played it a fair bit because 1.0 release and I can actually run it since they did the engine upgrade that meant that I couldn't play it on my previous computer anymore. But it's good stuff. It's always fun to automate things, and haven't really tried much of the boombox they have in the game, which lets you both repel insects and play soundtracks from other games from their studio. But the ambient music that are adjusted by biomes mainly is good. It's nice, it's alien, you know? Then I tried some Ara History Untold. Another different kind of Civ game.
I think the most noteworthy thing about it is it's made by former Civ 4 or Civ 5 developers.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of interesting ideas. It does get a bit ponderous at times, you shouldn't have to micromanage so much in a game with easily 8, 9, 10 cities in the early to mid game.
Eesh. That explains why the reviews I saw were mixed.
Yeah. And you are incentivized to grow even more as the game goes on because every 4 of the smaller ages there's a bigger age transition, and when the majority of the players have reached it, the bottom scoring civilization are just culled from the game, as long as they're AI controlled. Which is an interesting way to freshen up and free up some territory so that expansion doesn't just happen in the early game. And again, it's interesting ideas, but that can lead to some friction throughout the game.
It sounds like they kind of made a Civ Battle Royale.
That's an interesting point of view. Anyway, I also managed to get my hands, thanks to my brother, on a HOTAS, so I finally fire up some Ace Combat 7.
Okay.
And haven't gone very far into it, but yeah, getting stick and throttle in hand, going through even the early mission of your airport being attacked, unprompted, having the music that's not just good in itself, but adjusted so that if you're going at the pace that's expected of you, it ramps up exactly at the time you encounter your first enemy plane, and then the systems in the game dull it on a little bit when you are inside dense clouds. It's all very thrilling. So, absolutely love that experience and look forward to more of that, but with an upgrade comes an opportunity to play a lot of games. And in particular, because I couldn't run it at a stable frame rate, I finally got back around to playing Valkyrie Elysium. And I am absolutely loving my time there. The combat system feels so good, and playing it on hard was the right choice because the enemy don't feel spongy, but I am getting my bottom handed to me even by normal groups if I don't pay attention.
Right.
And it's a Sakuraba soundtrack that feels very much post I diversified my portfolio to the point where I don't think I heard a lot of organs in this last moment. I think I heard more Irish bagpipes than organs, in fact. And that's saying something.
That's always a funny way to measure Sakuraba to me.
Yeah,
Are there
the
organs
famed
or
organ,
not?
exactly. And right now it really helps set up a kind of somber tone because it's by a time where most of the human kingdoms are already far in disarray. And as a final little note, I do keep up with my gachas. I don't just bring them up every episode, but this time I wanted to shout out a fellow Discord moderator that I grew friend with, Little Liar, that also happens to have a YouTube channel where she posts remixes of music on the cello.
Oh.
She's a cellist, and there's multiple tracks by now, which are wonderful. In particular, The Outlander Who Caught the Wind was a very nice mix, and so I felt like a shout out was highly due.
Absolutely.
Especially since she's been known to listen to a couple of episodes here and there of this very podcast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Depending on, you know what, I've been talking for years about starting to interview people. We've never managed to pull that one off. This feels more possible, so I kind of want to look at that maybe towards the end of the year.
Well, I was thinking about that kind of things exactly, so
Great.
we'll keep that in mind.
All right.
And with that, I believe that that's all the time we have for today.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been a rather fun one, even if I'm a little brain dead on the music. But, Eddie, it's always good to have you back, and hopefully you're back more often again. We missed you around here.
I hope so as well. Things are
Which is
improving.
an awkward time to mention that we are going to take a little bit of a break for the next 1 to 2 episodes worth of time frame for Music Arcade specifically.
Yes, we will still be doing
Because-
podcasts, but one of those is going to be
Yes.
a Gathering of Gotchas kind of reunion where we discuss the end of the global version of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, and another is going to be another another Year of the Dragon episode where we talk about this new Pirate Yakuza game that's coming out.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun time. And we're just going to pause a little the music talk strictly in this episode to gloriously return in maybe a month or so.
So I guess we will see you all next episode, and until then, have a good one, guys.
See ya!
See you.